Imagine a phone so risky that the rule at the airport was not turn it off, not put it in airplane mode, and not keep it in your bag. The rule became do not bring it on the plane at all. That phone was the Samsung Galaxy Note 7, a 2016 flagship that was supposed to show Samsung at full power. It was premium, polished, and positioned as the kind of device customers trust with everything: work, travel, photos, payments, and the battery sitting inches from their hand. But the strangest part of the Note 7 story is not only that some phones overheated, it is that Samsung moved to replace the first recalled phones, and then replacement devices were swept into the crisis too. By the end, the US Department of Transportation banned all Galaxy Note 7 phones from air transportation, including carry-on bags, checked bags, and cargo. So the real question is not how did a phone fail? It is how does the fix fail so badly that a flagship product becomes something airlines have to keep off the aircraft? To understand why that ban hit so hard, start with what the Note 7 was meant to be. This was not a cheap gadget from a company testing the market. It was a Samsung flagship, part of a line built around power users, productivity, and the idea that a phone could be closer to a pocket computer than a simple calling device. That matters because product disasters feel different when the product was supposed to be the proof of excellence. A weak product can disappear quietly, a premium product collapses in public because every polished detail makes the safety failure look worse. The Note 7 did not enter the product graveyard because nobody understood it or because the market ignored it. The tragedy is sharper than that. People knew what it was supposed to represent. Samsung wanted it to stand for capability and confidence. Customers expected the boring parts, especially the hidden engineering, to be handled before the box ever reached a store. That expectation is the setup. The more complete the phone looked from the outside, the more shocking it became when the part nobody sees started controlling the entire story. The promise behind a flagship phone is simple. All the pressure is invisible. The screen can look bright, the frame can look clean, the software can feel fast, and the customer never has to think about the tiny safety margins packed inside the device. But a phone is also a sealed object full of compromises. Every feature depends on power. Every hour of battery life depends on a battery that has to sit inside a thin case, survive shipping, charging, pockets, desks, cars, beds, and bags, then repeat that cycle day after day. Samsung later attributed the Note 7 incidents to battery defects and announced stronger battery safety and quality assurance procedures. Keep that phrase in mind: battery defects. It sounds small, like one component misbehaved. In reality, for a modern phone, the battery is not just another part. It is the part that lets every other part exist. If the camera fails, the phone is disappointing. If the battery becomes a fire and burn hazard, the entire object changes category. It stops being a product people can evaluate by features. It becomes a risk people have to manage. And this is where the story gets darker. The first defect was only the first test. The real disaster was what happened after Samsung said it had a fix. A battery failure is scary because it can turn a familiar object into something unpredictable. You can understand a cracked screen, you can tolerate a buggy app, you can even return a phone that does not perform well. Those failures stay inside the normal customer service world. Overheating breaks that world. The customer is no longer asking whether the phone is worth the price. They are asking whether it is safe on a nightstand, safe in a backpack, safe in a warehouse, safe in a cabin full of passengers. That is why the official safety language mattered. The US Consumer Product Safety Commission described the first recall in terms of serious fire and burn hazards. Samsung later said battery defects were the cause of the incidents. At a simple level, that means the crisis lived inside the one part of the phone that stores energy all day and all night. A tiny physical failure does not need to look dramatic from the outside. It only has to create heat in the wrong place. That is why the replacement phase had to work instantly. Once the explanation becomes safety, the fix cannot merely sound reasonable. It has to give customers, regulators, retailers, and airlines a clean way to tell which phones are safe. At first, the crisis still looked like it had a normal path out. Samsung publicly moved to replace Note 7 devices after battery cell issues were identified in the original launch batch. That is the standard recall story. Find the risky units, pull them back, and give customers corrected devices. The first US CPSC recall covered about 1 million Galaxy Note 7 smartphones because of serious fire and burn hazards. That number is enormous for a premium device, but it still fits a story people understand. A bad batch got out. The company and regulators stepped in. Customers get replacements. The problem shrinks. In that version, the recall is painful, expensive, and embarrassing, but it is also a sign of control. You are telling the public that the dangerous group can be identified. You are saying there is an old version and a safe version. The recall line becomes a border. That border is everything. Without it, the customer has no map. With it, the story can still end as a contained mistake. The replacement phone became the trap because it carried a promise stronger than the original sale. When someone buys the launch device, they trust the brand. When someone accepts a replacement after a recall, they are trusting the repair of that trust. That is a much higher bar. A defective launch batch says the company missed a problem. A defective fix says the company may not yet understand the problem well enough to separate danger from safety. The later CPSC recall covered all Galaxy Note 7 phones, including replacement devices, after new overheating reports. That is the turn. The crisis was no longer old units versus corrected units, it was the whole product line becoming suspect. This is why the Note 7 story still feels bigger than a normal battery recall. The replacement program should have turned confusion into order. Instead, once replacement devices were part of the risk pool, the labels stopped helping. New no longer meant safe. Replacement no longer meant fixed. The thing that was supposed to restore confidence became evidence that confidence had run out. And once that happens, the crisis leaves the service desk. It heads straight for the boarding gate. Think about the problem from inside an airplane cabin. A phone that overheats in a living room is dangerous. A phone that overheats in a pressurized metal tube at altitude creates a different kind of decision. The airline cannot ask every passenger to explain the history of their device. A gate agent cannot run a private investigation into which unit came from which batch. A flight attendant needs a rule that can be understood in seconds. That is why the DOT ban is the most brutal image in the whole story. The department banned all Samsung Galaxy Note 7 phones from air transportation, not just used during flight, not just charging during flight. The ban included carry-on baggage, checked baggage, and cargo. That wording matters. Checked baggage means the phone cannot be hidden away below. Cargo means it cannot travel as freight. Carry-on means the passenger cannot simply promise to watch it. The entire transportation system needed one clean answer: no Note 7 on the aircraft. This is where Samsung's product problem became a public rule. The phone had crossed from consumer electronics into transportation safety, and the replacement failure is what made a narrow answer feel impossible. Total recall means there is no safe branch left for the public to follow. In the early version of the crisis, the story could still be divided. These phones are affected, those phones are replacements, this path returns you to normal. The expanded recall erased that comfort. The CPSC later recalled all Galaxy Note 7 phones, including replacement devices. That made the consequence simple and harsh. Owners were not being pointed toward a better Note 7. They were being pointed away from the Note 7 entirely. For a product graveyard story, that is the burial moment. A bad product can be patched. A confusing product can be explained. A risky product can sometimes be exchanged. But when the exchange device enters the recall too, the product loses its escape route. The same phone that had been sold as a premium tool for mobile work became something retailers, regulators, airlines, and customers needed to remove from normal life. The ban sign at the airport was only the most visible version of that removal. It compressed the whole failure into one instruction a traveler could not negotiate. In an airport, the safest Note 7 was no Note 7 at all. This is the real lesson. A recall fixes hardware only if it also fixes trust. The first Note 7 failures damaged the product. The replacement failures damaged the categories people needed to make decisions. Every safety crisis needs a simple truth. The manufacturer needs it to explain the fix. Regulators need it to write the recall. Retailers need it to handle returns. Airlines need it to protect cabins. Customers need it to know what is safe to carry in a pocket. For a moment, the simple truth was supposed to be, replace the affected phone. But once replacement devices also overheated, that truth collapsed. The public could no longer rely on the replacement line as a clean border between unsafe and safe. That is why the Note 7 belongs in a tech product graveyard. It was not just discontinued after a defect. It became a case study in what happens when the second answer fails. The company cannot merely retire the device, it has to prove the process behind the device has changed. And Samsung's own next move shows that. The phone died, but the battery safety question did not. The strangest afterlife of the Note 7 is that the most important product after it was not another piece of hardware, it was a safety process. Samsung later announced the cause of the Galaxy Note 7 incidents and said it was strengthening battery safety and quality assurance. That is the quiet part of the story, but it may be the most important. When the failure lives inside the battery, the future product cannot just look better. The company has to convince people that the way it tests, checks, and approves batteries has changed. This is why replacement units are so serious in a safety recall. They are not just spare inventory, they are a public claim that the root cause is understood. They tell the customer, we found the problem, and this device is outside it. The Note 7 exposed what happens when that claim breaks. The airplane ban was not just a punishment from regulators, it was a visible scoreboard for trust. By the time the phone was blocked from carry-on bags, checked bags, and cargo, the market had already learned the hardest lesson. If nobody can confidently identify the safe version, the product itself has to leave. So when you see the airport warning sign, do not read it as a weird footnote about an exploding phone. Read it as the whole Note 7 story in one frame. Samsung built a flagship. Battery defects turned it into a safety crisis. The first recall offered a way out. Then replacement devices were included in the later recall, and the way out disappeared. What started as a premium phone launch ended as a product passengers were not allowed to bring onto a plane. That is why the Note 7 is such a clean product graveyard case. It did not fail because nobody wanted a powerful Samsung phone. It failed because, after the replacement phase, nobody could rely on the answer to the most basic question, is this one safe? First failures damage